want to talk to you first of all about Boris Johnson. Yes, it's kind of old news now, isn't it? He resigned on Friday in a fit of pique over his various peerages being blocked, but also because he found out he was going to face suspension from Parliament. That meant a vote in Parliament, likely to mean a by-election in his constituency, and likely being forced out of office. He claims he's been forced out by the blob. It's a political hit job. It's a witch hunt. Boris Johnson, if you're watching, it's none of those things. The only person who has forced you out of office is yourself. If you're so sure that it's the establishment that hates you and that it's MPs who just want to oust you because of their political careers, and whether it's Rishi Sunak or others on the back benches, why don't you just stay on, take the hit from the Privileges Committee, take the vote in the House of Commons and stand in the by-election? If you are so sure that you are the man of the people, that not just Tory party members but the British public not just wants but desperately needs you to stay in office, then you will stand in that by-election and you'll win it. But of course, you know secretly that you won't win it because you don't have the support. You weren't forced out by the blob. You were forced out by the fact that 62 ministers in your own government that you'd appointed said they couldn't work for you anymore. You were forced out by the fact that you did lie to Parliament about breaking laws that you brought in that ruined everyone else's lives. You have many enemies. There are people who hate you because of Brexit. There are people who hate you because of lockdown. But those people didn't bring you down. You brought you down. Yes, you have many enemies, but the only real enemy that you have, Boris Johnson, is yourself. Goodbye and good riddance is what I say, because the truth is, everybody, Boris Johnson doesn't care about the Tory party. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about Tory voters. He doesn't care about your energy bill that you can't afford, or the mortgage bill you can't afford, or your rent. He doesn't care whether you're waiting 2 years for an NHS operation. He doesn't care how high or low your taxes are, because Boris Johnson cares about two things, and just two things: Boris Johnson's bank account and Boris Johnson. And the sooner he's out of politics and out of our lives, the better. Well, that's what I think. Candice Holdsworth is with me. We're going to find out what she thinks in a few minutes, and we're going to be hearing from you. Do get in touch. Tweet me at TalkTV. Text the word TALK to 87222. You can call. Love to get your calls on air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I want to know, is this the end of Boris Johnson's political career, or could he make a comeback? And crucially, would you want him to? You know where I stand now. So how do we think that Lord Robert Hayward stands on this? Lord Hayward is not just a Conservative peer, but he's also a polling expert. Good morning to you, Lord Hayward.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Right, first of all, let's ask you, with your poll, I always like to ask you different notes, with your polling expert hat on, is it likely that Boris Johnson would have won a by-election, and does he have a chance of a comeback?
No. In answer to your first question, you're absolutely right. And what is striking over the last 24 hours or so, and particularly this morning, is how many people are now talking, just as you have done, absolutely clearly about Boris's failings and the fact that they actually rest with him rather than with other people around him. And as far as so he wouldn't have won the by-election in Uxbridge. Whether he'll try to make a comeback, I think it's less and less likely, because the level of criticism that we're now actually seeing from all and sundry people. You had Sir Desmond Swayne on earlier on. I was struck by how critical he was of Boris, somebody who would not have said what he did this morning only a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and that's a crucial thing. Now, we had various cabinet ministers. Grant Shapps was doing the media round yesterday, yesterday saying, "No, look, he loves him, admires him, worked for him, blah blah blah." But basically, the world has moved on, and there's no doubt at all when it comes to voters generally, the Conservative Party membership, and indeed Tory MPs, they have moved on, haven't they?
They have. There's no question about that. Groups of people who were previously described as a wing of the party who would support Boris are now down to groups, or they're down to a rump. And what was also striking about the earlier interviews you had is that there's no indication, as was indicated on the front of the Sunday Times yesterday, the rebellion has fallen flat, I think was the phrase that was used. And,
well, there was his expectation there would be a string of more resignations. We had Nadine Dorries resign, and then we had Boris Johnson, and then we had Nigel Adams. And again, I'm sorry, Nadine is a household name. Nigel hasn't, I don't think a household name in his own household, with all due respect to him. There was an expectation loads more would resign. What I couldn't work out was, what would be the point of that? Was the idea that there would be a string of by-elections, not just the 3 or 4 with Margaret Ferrier that Rishi Sunak would face? He'd lose a load of them, and then that would undermine him and topple him. But that is not going to endear Boris Johnson to the Conservative Party, losing seats to the Labour or the SNP or the Liberal Democrats.
No, absolutely. And Peter Cardwell put it well just now when he said there wasn't going to be a challenge to Rishi Sunak as a result of this. And there is no question that if other people had resigned, they would have been viewed as rebels without a cause. There's a question as to why these people have resigned, given what the House of Lords Appointments Commission has said in a quite extraordinary statement, because they don't normally make any comment about any of their work. They in private, they work very effectively, but as I say, it's just striking that really all of Boris's arguments are being undermined by one person or another.
And look, he clearly thinks it's a witch hunt. He clearly wants us to think that he thinks it is. In terms of what does happen now, though, we have the Privileges Committee meeting today at 11 o'clock. Now, this is the committee that was looking into not Partygate, but whether the Prime Minister misled deliberately the House of Commons when he denied any knowledge of any parties or any breaking of rules. Once he was fined by the police, and once we've had more information come to them, even only recently from his WhatsApp messages released by the Cabinet Office, preparing his evidence for the COVID inquiry. We understand, were going to suspend him for 20 days, more than the 10 days which would have led to a vote in Parliament on and possible recall, and then that by-election. That committee, they're going to go ahead, we understand, they're going to publish their report, and they could still go ahead with some sort of punishment like banning him or suspending him from being able to use his parliamentary pass as a former MP. Do you think that, with your Tory peer head on, do you think that's the right thing to do? Or is that going to just look like quite petty, just sort of twisting the knife, after your man is already down?
Because I've not seen the report itself, trying to speculate on what would be appropriate in terms of action thereafter is somewhat difficult. I don't think the people on that committee are going to take, whether it's what you described or something else, as petty actions. This is one of Boris's problems. He's criticising a group of people who are very senior politicians. Forget Harriet Harman and her chairmanship. If you look on the Tory side, Bernard Jenkin and Charles Walker, very, very senior, long-serving Conservative members of Parliament. Alberto Costa, a lawyer. Andy Carter, before he came into Parliament, a senior businessman. So I think they will act, I hope they will act in a sensible way. They will look at their report, publish it, and then review what they do after. I couldn't preempt it in terms of what they may or may not do, however. Sorry.
Well, this is the thing, though. When he says there's a witch hunt, we know we've got Donald Trump claiming this on the other side of the Atlantic as well. There is no doubt there are an awful lot of people in Parliament and in the country at large and in the establishment, the civil service, who loathe and despise and fear Boris Johnson. They hate him for Brexit. They hate him personally. They want his downfall. They believe that if he hadn't appeared back on the scene and become Tory leader and won that election in 2019, that Brexit wouldn't have happened. They'd been able to have a second referendum and overturn it. And they want to punish him for it. I mean, there are people like me who are angry with him over lockdowns and breaches and things like of lockdown rules that he imposed on the rest of us. But their feeling towards him, I mean, it is visceral. I mean, I don't for a shadow of a doubt think that Harriet Harman doesn't sort of sit there going, rubbing her hands with glee at the prospect of punishing Boris Johnson. He is right to say that there is a deliberate, orchestrated campaign to undo Brexit, and getting rid of him is part of that.
No, I don't agree with that.
Really?
You've got a whole series of people And I think Desmond Swayne voted for Brexit, for example, and yet he was making a whole series of comments. And he made the point that Boris may or may not, as you identified, have won an election. The opposition was incredibly weak at that point. But there should have been progress with Brexit. I'd voted Remain. And by the way, I'm talking to you from Harriet Harman's constituency. I am one of her constituents. So there was the opportunity to administer Brexit effectively. The problem with Boris, as you and everybody that you've had on this morning, some of whom have been fairly close in terms of their views towards him, he failed to administer Brexit. As far as he was concerned, there was a vote. It was a one-day decision. Let's move on to doing other things, whatever else they may have. It's a very complicated process. And he failed to deliver on Brexit. So, yes, you were right. There's all these people who were Remainers, who hated Boris, they're anti-Tory party. But what is striking this morning is that people who might have been inclined to support Boris, might have been inclined to have voted Brexit, probably did vote Brexit. They are actually now saying to Boris, enough is enough.